Arturo has shown his work internationally at the embassies the American embassies in Moscow, in the Croatian embassy in Guyana. His work is currently showing at Mountain Trails Gallery in Sedona and Jackson Hole, and he is in the Gerald Peters Gallery in Santa Fe, where he lives and works. I asked him what was on the horizon for him in the near future. He is trying to schedule a painting trip with all of his other obligations to the Denali National Park in Alaska. So we've got that to look forward to. Give a warm welcome to Arturo Chavez.
This award that I won down in Phoenix last week is, I'm not really standing here on the ground, I'm actually bouncing off the rafters. I mean, it was really quite an honor. 31 of the top Western artists in the country, and they awarded me the Purchase Award, so yeah, very, very honored. So, good evening everyone. Thank you for your presence here, and thank you for the opportunity to share some insights into the world of art with you today. Now, the format that I'd like to use for the presentation is that I give you my talk, which lasts about 20 minutes, and then we'll have a brief Q&A afterwards, at which time you'll have the opportunity to ask me some questions. So please hold on to those questions until then, because oftentimes they'll be answered throughout the course of the talk. So I'd like to begin with a little humor. Pablo Picasso was sitting down in a cafe in Paris doodling on a sketch pad, and a woman recognized who he was, and she walks up to him and she says, "That is beautiful." He says, "You like it?" She says, "I love it." He tears it out and hands it to her. She says, "It's for me?" He says, "Yes, it's for you." She says, "Will you sign it?" Picasso says, "Now that will cost you $30,000. That's a true story. So what's in a name, right? What's in a signature? Let me begin by saying my name is Arturo Chavez. I was born up near Taos in 1949. I'm a 13th generation native New Mexican with my roots dating back to 1601, when the first Chavez came to New Mexico from Spain. And yes, I'm a visual artist, you all know that. But there are some things about my career that have influenced my art that I thought you'd be interested to know. For example, I studied concert classical guitar and music at the University of New Mexico. I was a pilot for about 10 years and I did some charter flying during that time. I was also a mission pilot for the Civil Air Patrol, which is the civilian branch of the U.S. Air Force. And I had special training in search and rescue for downed military and civilian aircraft in rugged mountainous terrain was my specialty. So I did a lot of low-level rugged mountain flying in those days. And though I don't fly planes anymore, I still do love to fly in my paintings. In fact, painting aerial scenes are some of my favorites. But it was in 1983 that I made that all-important leap of faith to paint full-time as a professional artist. And it was that decision that I never looked back upon. I specialize in large-scale Western landscapes and oil. And though my career has taken me over many different directions over the past 28 years now, repeatedly, consistently, continuously, I've painted landscapes. People ask me why I so fervently paint the land, and I think that could be summed up in one word. A concept or an ideal, actually, which is very near and dear to all Americans. Anybody care to guess what that concept or ideal might be? Say again?
The love of it.
The love of it?
Exploration,
Conservation, preservation, yes. Freedom. From the foundation of our country, our success has been intricately bound to the land. The land has provided us with a physical vehicle for us to pursue our dreams. We're grateful for our land. We should protect and preserve our land for ourselves and for our future generations. You know, when my parents were young, they used to load us kids up in the car every summer and take off to the western states, camping out of the trunk of the car on a one-month vacation, visiting our national parks and monuments. My parents made sure that we were aware of our American heritage and our public lands. And I'm eternally grateful to them for this. So this is in a nutshell why I paint landscapes. Painting the land is an honor and a privilege, which will take me my entire life to explore, for sure. But I think in a historical context, my painting style, inspiration, and technique can be traced to some degree back to the school of 1830, otherwise known as the Barbizon School of French landscape painting. The Barbizon School derived its name from the Barbizon village in northern France, where most of the school painters resided. And this was a school of artists that was led by Theodore Rousseau. And they rejected the classical landscape style of the day, and they insisted upon direct studies from nature, outdoors, on location as their primary tenet or credo. They were part of a movement towards realism in art, which grew out of the romantic context of the day. But you know, today we don't know where on the scale that our contemporary paintings are going to wind up within the context of art history. Because it takes about 100 years for art history to shake itself out, and for such determinations to be made by the art historians. So in the meantime, between now and that 100-year mark, I'd like to say that my paintings also are derived from direct study from nature, outdoors, on location, just as the Barbizon school painters. And I can break my process down for you into 4 basic steps. I'll give you an overview of those steps, and then we'll talk a little bit more in depth about each one. Well, first and foremost is painting on location. This is where it all begins. This is where the inspiration happens. Second is drawing and composition in charcoal and pencil in the studio. Third is the intermediate painting in oil. And fourth is the final large-scale work. This is 5 by 10 feet. This is 24 by 48 inches. This is 5 by 10 feet. So step number 1, when I'm painting on location, the most important thing to me is color. I'm interested in how light is interacting with matter, how light is being scattered, reflected, and absorbed. I'm interested, for example, in the density and luminosity of shadows between foreground, middle ground, and background. And you know, there's really nothing intellectual about this painting on location process. It's an emotional response to nature. I'm doing a dance with nature's color. It takes me anywhere from 1.5 hours to 3 hours, depending on the complexity of the subject matter, to capture a field sketch like you see in this slide here. And I take photos from beginning, middle, and end of the session in order to document the changing light and dark patterns and to capture the surrounding details. And I use those photos back in the studio in step number 2, drawing and composition in charcoal and pencil. So, when I'm done with that little field sketch on location, I pack up and I head back to the studio and I put that little field sketch on hold to dry for a week to 10 days. And you'll see the significance of that sketch as we move along. And I move into step number 2, drawing and composition in charcoal and pencil. Composition meaning where within the context of the picture plane things are placed specifically, and value. That is to say how light and how dark things are without color. Because remember, when I was painting on location, I was concerned primarily with color. Well, this phase of my process, the drawing phase, I've abandoned color. I'm not interested in color at all. I'm only interested in how light and how dark things are on a black and white and gray scale, and where they're placed specifically within the context of the picture plane. It usually takes me anywhere from 3 to 5 drawings to get a drawing that I'm really excited about and ready to paint. And I will at times employ topographical maps in the sketching process, if the terrain is unusually complex, such as in the Grand Canyon, to get a better lay of the land and the distances involved. So when I'm in a little drawing, I grid the drawing with horizontal and vertical lines right on top of the drawing. You can see an example of here, a gridded drawing of the Grand Canyon. Now this grid system has been used by artists for probably 500 years or more as a means or a method of transferring drawings and paintings up to larger scale works proportionately. So once I've got that drawing transferred up onto the intermediate canvas and I'm ready to begin painting, and by the way, intermediate canvas sizes for me range anywhere from 18 by 24 inches all the way up to 48 by 60 inches as intermediate sizes. So once I have that drawing transferred up onto the intermediate canvas and I'm ready to begin painting, I pull that little field sketch out of inventory that I did several weeks ago, remember? And now that it's thoroughly dry, here's where it becomes important. Because I use that sketch to match my colors, color for color, all the colors that I saw that day while painting on location. So I'll whip up a little paint on the palette, and I'll put a dab right up on the field sketch. If it doesn't match, I'll wipe it off, adjust the tone on the palette, put another dab up there until I get all the colors matched. It takes me anywhere from a half a day to as much as a day to mix up the palette, depending on the size painting I'll be embarking on. I know that if it's a large scale work, it'll be taking me anywhere from 3 to 6 months to produce. I'll mix up sufficient quantities of paint and put them up in large tubes like this, and crimp them and label them and seal them so the paint doesn't dry out over the course of the painting process. Now oftentimes this third step in my process becomes the final step. Because after all, a 30-inch by 60-inch painting, as an example, is a pretty good sized work. I would have considered it a finished artwork. And so I'll sign it and varnish it and frame it and photograph it send it out to a gallery, museum, or a show. But oftentimes I feel like I've not been able to express enough detail, or the subject matter is so grandiose that I feel like I need to enlarge that intermediate painting up to a large scale work of, say, 5 by 10, 6 by 12, or even 7 by 14 feet. So this is in a nutshell what I go through to get a painting. Painting on location to ascertain color. I'm interested primarily in one thing, color, so I'm juggling one ball. Step number 2, value and composition, juggling 2 balls. Then in step number 3, I put them all 3 together. Juggle all 3 balls at once, color, composition, and value. Oftentimes this becomes the final painting, but if not, I'll move into the large scale work. And this is the 4-step process that I go through with all my paintings. You know, the famous British physicist, Lord Kelvin, after whom the absolute temperature scale is named, he once said in a lecture, "When you cannot express it in numbers, your knowledge is of a meager and unsatisfactory kind." Well, he was, of course, referring to the furtherance of science. The problem is, however, that art will never be a science, and yet science has been at the core of making art for hundreds of years. But oftentimes artists maintain with me that art should be and is exclusively an intuitive process. But in my humble opinion, well, maybe I should say honestly, more accurately, my not so humble opinion. Once thoughts cross over from the right over to the left hemisphere of the brain, we do indeed think rationally. And we use both hemispheres of our brain in most of our thought processes. So people ask me, how is it that then I approach my finished compositions then? What tools do I use and what methods do I employ? Well, I teach a 2-week in-depth workshop on the subject. And we don't have time for that tonight. So let me just say in brief that I use the various ratios of plan magnitude. That's a fancy way of saying that I place the various compositional elements within the context of the picture plane using the golden section and the rule of thirds. And we'll talk more about those. The number phi is a magical number. Has anybody ever heard of this number before? It's spelled P-H-I, pronounced phi. Now I'm not talking about pi, the relationship of the diameter to the circumference of a circle, but phi. Well, Mario Livio, the astrophysicist, in his book, The Story of Phi, has referred to this number as the world's most astonishing number. Well, think about that for a moment. I mean, that's quite a distinction, wouldn't you say? The world's most astonishing number of all the numbers we know and use. Well, what makes this number so interesting and so fascinating and so intriguing is that phi actually provides us with a wonderful example of that feeling of utter amazement. Well, that Albert Einstein values so much. You know, in Einstein's own words, he said, "The fairest thing we can experience is the mysterious. It is the fundamental emotion which stands at the cradle of true art and science. He who knows it not and cannot wonder, can no longer feel amazement, is as good as dead, a snuffed out candle." Phi is a ratio which occurs in nature. Yes, it seems that nature has mysteriously selected this ratio as a means of inventing itself. We're all very familiar with this ratio, as a matter of fact, intuitively, because every time we look each other in the eyes, we're affirming the number phi, if we know it or not. It's more often referred to as the golden section, or the divine proportion, that Leonardo da Vinci referred to it as. It's a specific ratio of 1 to 1.618, or in layman's terms, 1 to a little more than 1.5. But specifically, mysteriously, intriguingly, yes, even perplexingly, nature's chosen 1 to 1.618. Well, a little historical background on this number phi. As we shall see, the number phi is a never-ending, never-repeating number of 1.61803398887 ... ad infinitum. And such never-ending, never-repeating numbers have intrigued humans since antiquity. One story has it that when the Greek mathematician Hippasus of Metapontum discovered in the 5th century BC that the golden section is neither a whole number, such as the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc., nor a ratio of 2 whole numbers, such as the familiar fractions 1/2, 2/3, and 3/4, which are collectively known as rational numbers. This discovery absolutely shocked the Pythagoreans, the followers of the famous mathematician Pythagoras, because you see, the Pythagorean worldview at the time was based on an extreme admiration for what they called the arithmos, or the intrinsic properties of whole numbers, and their ratios, and their presumed role in the cosmos. The realization that there exist such numbers that go on forever, without ever exhibiting any signs of pattern or repetition, caused a true philosophical crisis in their lives. So much so, they wanted the information squelched, hidden away, sequestered. They didn't want anybody to know about it because they thought that it was a horrific divine error. Of course, we know now that it makes perfect sense that such a number would play a vital role in the creation of the universe because of the never-ending, never-repeating nature of the cosmos. Just ask a fractal geometrist about this never-ending, never-repeating nature of the cosmos. I mean, it's fascinating. Well, anyway, a few examples of this ratio would be the width to the height of an egg, 1 to 1.618. The width of the height of the hand, 1 to 1.618. The width of the height of the base, 1 to 1.618. This is why I say every time we look each other in the eyes, we're affirming this ratio. Because if these critical dimensions stray outside of 1 to 1.618, just a little too much, well, I mean, we at least become concerned for the person we're looking at. I know, that sounds humorous, but it's true, they're critical dimensions. The relationship between the upper and lower leg, 1 to 1.618. The way in which a nautilus shell grows in a spiral, geometric, logarithmic pattern is based on the ratio of 1 to 1.618. So over and over and over again, we find this ratio in nature, in birds, trees, animals, plants, nuts, shells, seeds, insects, flower. Maitland Graves, the professor of design and color at the Pratt Institute in New York, conducted a survey, and he asked a group of people to select their favorite rectangle out of a myriad of different sizes and ratios. Well, guess which one we chose as our favorite rectangle? Intuitively, without knowing the dimensions. The golden rectangle, the one that measures 1 over 1.618. So I figure if it's good enough for nature, it's good enough for me. And I use this ratio in my paintings. Take just a quick break here to get my laser pointer. So I use this ratio in my paintings. Well, the last time I mentioned this, a very excited, exuberant, zealous student challenged me to prove it. Can you imagine that? Okay, well. So let's see if I can shed some additional light on the subject, as it were. Let's suppose I'm composing a painting of the Grand Canyon, and I want to know where within the context of the picture plane to place, in this case, the Temple of Isis. Well, many people think I just look at my painting, look at the photo, and place it in the painting where it is in the photo. But that's not what I do. Instead, I use the section to determine where specifically Isis and other elements of the composition will reside. As an example, this is one of my large-scale work titled Rock of Ages, measuring 80 inches by 160 inches. So if I take 160 inches times 0.618, I get 99 inches. Less than a change. So come back here and draw a vertical line right down the canvas of 99 inches from the right-hand side in this case. All right, so what have I done? Well, I created an instant, harmonious relationship with the golden section, one that we agree is harmonious, we're familiar with, and we like. I do the same thing on the vertical side. Take 80 times 0.618, it's 49 inches plus some change. Draw a horizontal line across the canvas at 49 inches, and where the two lines intersect, I know the specific region of the canvas that I'll be placing my key principal components of the composition. And I try to do the same thing as much as practical, and that's the key word here, practical, with other elements of the composition as well, using multiples of 0.618. As an example, the reposoir here in the foreground. By the way, reposoir, that's another fancy word. It's a French word, le reposoir, which literally translates into an altar of repose, or the altar of repose. The reposoir is a device or an artifice which sets the foreground off from the background and creates a sense of depth and space within the picture. It also provides a place from which the viewer can view the painting in proper perspective. Well, you notice that the reposoir enters the painting here at 99 inches from the right-hand side, traverses the diagonal, and exits up here at the upper right-hand side at 49 inches. Once again, creating a harmonious relationship with the golden section. All right. Well, I think you all get the basic idea. So the question then arises, do I use numbers exclusively, rigidly, like a slave in my paintings, drawings, and compositions? Well, as a matter of fact, I do not. I use the numbers, but I don't let them use me. After all, if something needs moving around intuitively, I'll move it. This is where art and science diverge. And this is why art will never be a science. There's a saying, however, if you don't know where you're going, any road will do. How many of you have been down that road before? Listen, folks, I've been down that road many times with regards to my compositions. I tell you, it does not end. That's why I use the numbers in my paintings, because they point me in the direction of the likelihood of a better composition. And so, after all this technical preparation, topographical maps, painting on locations, multiple paintings, multiple drawings, proportional division, after all this technical preparation, I do in fact strive for beauty, harmony, and above all else I strive for an emotional quality to the painting. After all, it's an artist's ability to evoke an emotional response from the viewer, whether it's an abstract work of art or a super realistic work of art. It doesn't matter. It's that emotional response which is, in my estimation, the hallmark of a truly great work of art. Okay, so I've given you an overview of how and why I paint the way I do. And with that, I would like to segue into showing you some more examples of drawings, intermediate paintings, and final scale works. And in the meantime, I'd like for each of you to be thinking about a question you might have for me regarding art. And remember, there are no silly questions in art, so please feel free to ask away, and I'll see if I can answer them now. The last time I checked, I didn't know everything there was to know about art. But I did get up this morning to think that today, I was one step closer. I'm only kidding. Okay, I'd like to start by showing you the basic layout of my studio. You can see my paints mixed up here on the palette, my brushes, my charcoal pencil drawing, my intermediate painting underway, and the field sketch up on the easel. The intermediate painting finished, which measured about so big. And here's the final painting measuring 48 by 77 inches. By the way, if you have any questions at this point, please feel free to ask away. This is Bryce Canyon National Park in the dead of winter, field sketch. Here's the finished painting, measuring 30 by 60 inches. All these little spires in here are called hoodoos. If you've ever been up to Bryce, there's thousands of them in this canyon. Thousands, literally thousands. Once I finished this painting, which took me about 2 months to finish, it's 30 by 60 inches. I was thinking of taking it up to 60 by 120, 20 by 10 feet, but I have to tell you, I just didn't have it to paint those hoodoos. They were so detailed, and there were so many of them, I said, that's the last hoodoos I'm going to paint. I did do other paintings at Bryce after that, several months later, but I never did this one large scale. This is a gridded drawing of an area between Bernalillo, New Mexico, and Cuba. This is the gridded drawing, and I want you to pay particular attention to this little tree right here, which ultimately disappears in the final painting. This is the intermediate painting measuring 15 by 36. Is that right, Roger?
Yes.
Okay. We have the person that owns this painting right here with us. Here's the final painting, which measured 30 by 72 inches, and I took this juniper out. There's no reason for it. I didn't open a book. It was just my intuition said that. It was competing with the cloud layer, I thought. So I think it helps simplify the composition. Here's a sketch of the Grand Canyon, pencil sketch. You can very lightly see I'm not sure if you can see the grids anymore, but they were marked. And sometimes I'll erase the grids after I'm done when I frame it, if I decide to frame the drawing. But this was a gridded sketch of the Grand Canyon under cloud. Here's one of the first paintings I did of it, which is 9 by 12 inches. And here's the final painting measuring 50 by 80 inches. And this is the only painting I've ever won 2 awards in the same show with. I won a gold medal and the best of show with this piece. So, again, this is Temple of Isis, one of my favorite structures in the canyon. This is Cheops. This is a preliminary sketch of the Sandia buffalo herd, just right outside of Albuquerque. This is the intermediate painting, measuring about like so. And the final painting measuring 36 by 62. I noticed I put here, I put a little cap in this space which wasn't in the intermediate painting. The painting, by the way, is called Sage Advice. And then this piece is of me working on the painting to give you an idea of scale. It's a 24 by 48 painting of a beautiful western sunset. And here's the final painting measuring 4 by 8 feet. So you can see I was able to capture a lot more detail up here in the cloud. A lot more depth. And here we have Bryce Canyon National Park again. Bryce is notorious for, it's very difficult to catch a fresh snowfall in Bryce because the way the canyon sits, the snow melts off within a day or two. I just was very lucky to catch this day and paint it in fresh snow. I talked to several photographers that have been coming up there 15 years to try to catch this. This is a 54 by 90 painting. This is a painting called O'Keefe Country, 4 by 8 feet. This is the Echo Amphitheater up at Ghost Ranch. This is another 4 by 8 foot painting of western sunset outside of Albuquerque, New Mexico, West Mesa. These are all oils. Yeah, I paint only in oil. And I started my career in watercolor. For the first 10 years, shifted into watercolors and then acrylics. And then I found that the acrylics just dried too fast, and I couldn't get these smooth gradations, smooth blendings that you can get with oil. So I went exclusively oil about 15 years ago. This is a small group of pronghorn antelope. This is a painting of sunrise on the way up to Bryce and Zion in the winter in southwestern Utah. Oh, I recognize this is our beautiful Sedona, isn't it? See this area here? The chapel back in there. What's the name of that chapel? The Chapel of the Holy Cross. Yeah, this painting is right in the front gallery at Mountain Trails Gallery here in Sedona. These are our beautiful Sandia Mountains right behind Albuquerque in February. It's another one of our glorious western sunsets. These clouds just aflame light. This is also up in what I call O'Keefe Country, around Abiquiu. These are our Teton Mountains in September, early snow. This is Grand Teton back up under cloud. This is Jenny Lake in the distance, and you can see it's low water. They were having a drought. This was in 2008, I believe. And then we have a little herd of bison grazing here in the foreground. And this is me in front of the painting to give you a sense of scale. It's 48, I think, by 120 inches. It's our beautiful Grand Canyon again, with Zoroaster this time as the featured player. Brahma Temple, Johnson Butte, Sumner Butte, right down here, O'Neill Butte. And then, of course, this is the Vishnu Station. Now, we're looking at 1.7 billion years of our planet's history when we look at from the north rim down to the schist layers here. It's what I love so much about the western landscape, is it's so rugged and so raw and so exposed versus back east, where it's all grown and rounded over and covered. Yeah. It's hard to see it. We can't see it. I think that's what attracts artists out here to the west, is this open ruggedness and exposed geology. This is a grid sketch of an area called La Ventana, which literally translates into meaning the window. This is a window. This is a natural arch occurring across the Acoma Reservation in New Mexico, central Mexico. This is the intermediate painting measuring 30 by 48 inches, and I felt like this area was, for me, it was closed off too much. It was pinched off. I didn't feel open. So the final painting measures 30 by 72, and I opened it up to include this space back inside here. So I just redesigned it and repainted it. I didn't do another drawing on this, by the way. I just went right to the final painting. You can see all the grid marks on it. This gives me an idea where, when I'm transferring the drawing onto the canvas, I know where I'm at any one time. So it's a roadmap. I find that when I start making larger scale works, that I get very easy to get lost. If you don't have some kind of a roadmap to go by. This is another painting of Temple of Isis at sunrise, and it was one of the preliminary paintings I did for the ultimate painting, Rock of Ages. But I pitched Rock of Ages a little bit earlier in the morning. You'll notice these shadows are a little longer than in this one. This is about another half an hour earlier in the morning. And this also does not have a repoussoir here in the foreground. You see, there's nothing for the viewer to stand on in the foreground. This is a great painting for a pilot. Pilots love this feeling, the sensation of hanging out in space and nothing underneath them. Yeah. Most of us like to have some kind of ground underneath us. So this serves as a securing, anchoring device as well. It's another drawing, preliminary drawing of a small grouping of pronghorn antelope. This is the intermediate painting. This painting was purchased for the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railway about 2 or 3 years ago for their permanent collection. And these are the Oregon Mountains, by the way. Oregon Mountains right behind Las Cruces. If you follow this range out to the left, you'll come out to the White Sands Missile Range. The final painting measured 4 by 10 feet. 4 by 10 feet.
That was the one that was purchased.
This one was purchased by a private homeowner in Palm Desert. And when he hung it in his home, he sent me a picture of it. And it looked like a painting about this big. The foyer was so big in his house that it swallowed this. A 10-foot painting was swallowed up in his home. But people often ask me, well, who has the space to do these giant paintings? Where do you paint these? People out there have big homes. 10,000 square foot. And it was his second or third home. I mean, But I want to show you something very interesting about this piece. This dough, this is the final version here. Okay, and I took the dough out, and I moved her back about 30 feet and put another dough along with her.
Yeah.
And I added 3 more in the distance here. You see, paintings evolve. This might be a good composition. I don't know, but I just decided it was too much. For some reason or other, there's no right or wrong about it. I just decided I was going to move her back and give her a companion back in the distance.
May I ask, what 2 different lighting conditions were those photographs taken under? They seem to be a different.
Yeah, it is. It's a good observation. This particular one was taken in my studio with natural north light, no flash, and this one was taken by a professional photographer in the studio. So he had it flashed, or he had it lit with incandescent light, I guess, which warmed it up a lot.
So I presume that the final one was one that would more accurately represent the painting?
In terms of the color, the accurate color, I can't remember. I think I remember painting it somewhere in between the two. And that's the trouble with reproductions. They never are the right value. They never are the right color. The most important thing is that they spell the name right, I think. That's the most important thing. I love to paint the Northern California coast. This is one of my favorite areas. This is called Garapata Beach, which is just south of Carmel, about 5 miles. And I love the breakers. I love the sea life. This piece is called Sea Pirates. Yeah, they're out marauding for, scavenging for whatever they can come across. Same area. This is the Point Lobos State Reserve, right outside of Carmel. If you can see Pebble Beach back here, and Carmel, looking northwest here. This is a sea lion rookery, and this point is called Pinnacle Point. Has anybody ever been out to Point Lobos? Yeah. It's quite a beautiful, one of the most beautiful spots on the globe. Put it on your list of things to do someday. You won't be sorry. It's an absolutely beautiful place. Well, here's another 6 by 12 foot painting of me standing in front of the painting of the Sandia Mountains right behind Albuquerque, and with the doe and her fawn grazing in the foreground there, and I have a detail of that so you can see that. Back to my process. Here's another drawing. You can see the lines of perspective going out here to the principal vanishing point on the horizon. And you can see the grid lines. You can see my proportional markings in here, where I've placed things. These dark lines indicate something to me, where I'm going to be placing objects within the context of the picture. This is the final painting underway. I start from the top down on a blank white canvas except for my drawing. And I work usually from the top down. This is about maybe 2 or 3 weeks worth of weeks of work.
Can you show us the 1 to 6.18 ratio in this one?
Well, let's see. This area right here, this division point right here, comes in at 0.618. Once I do the drawing and I figure all this stuff out, kind of forget about the numbers. Numbers were invented to confirm our intuition. Before the numbers were invented, we were figuring stuff out intuitively, and then we started doubting ourselves. And this is my opinion. I think that then we started inventing numbers to confirm our intuition. So once I do the drawing and I've got everything figured out, I forget about the numbers. I start painting. This looks like a key area to me, right here and through here. Okay, so here's about a month into the drawing, into the painting maybe. I've still got the foreground and the sky to complete. Here's the foreground completed. And finally the sky. And then the last piece is me standing in front of the painting to give you a sense of scale again. It's a 4 by 8 foot painting. Looking at a painting like this, you have no idea what size it is, unless you have something to compare it to. So we're back to Rock of Ages, which is the beginning of my presentation. This is, once again, hanging down at the Phoenix Art Museum right now in a show which will be shown through November 20th. It's a group of 31 artists, Western artists, called the West Select. So if you get down to the Phoenix Art Museum, please stop in and enjoy the show. Each artist has 4 pieces of work, including sculptures. This piece is the largest piece in the show, measuring 80 by 160 inches. So that concludes my presentation. I would welcome any more further questions you have, and I really do appreciate you coming out and making the effort to join me for this presentation. Thank you so much. There's coffee and dessert, I think, in the back, right? Yeah. Were there any more questions? Totally welcome some questions. Yes.
When you do your grid lines, how do you decide how many you want to make the grid? Are they squares?
They're squares, yes.
How do you decide how many squares you want to make?
Well, how many squares I want to make? I usually start on my drawings with 2-inch squares. And then when I go up to my intermediate painting, I just double that. So it's 4 by 4 squares. And my final painting is 8 by 8. That makes it easy. It makes it easy to go up proportionately.
So it doesn't have anything to do with how big the first painting is. You just start with a 2-inch.
Yes. Yeah. That's a proportional division which you can make any size.
I'm curious about the salability and receptivity of clients who might know that they will know that there are 2 paintings that are nearly identical of different sizes. Is there a problem? You ever run into problems with that?
I've never had a problem with that. I've had people ask me, do I do the same painting twice? And I say, no, they never come out the same. Even if I try, there's something a little bit different about them, but I always do them larger. So my intermediate paintings range anywhere from 48 inches, but then they oftentimes become the final painting, so that's the last one out there.
Oh.
So it's not every one of them becomes a large scale work. First of all, I limit the space that I can put in. Second of all, it takes an enormous amount of time and resources. This painting right here, I'm not kidding you, I've got $42,000 tied up into it before it hits the museum.
How much?
$42,000. Panels, frames, shipping, photography. It cost me $1,400 just to photograph it. Yeah, that's right. They're an enormous undertaking, enormous undertaking. People don't believe me. $23,000 for the frame. Yeah. So I don't do a whole lot of them. I try to do maybe a couple a year. Yeah. And then, of course, I've limited my clientele severely. But I'll tell you one thing, they are out there. You got to build it, and then they come. It's not the same. It's true. It's true. They will come. And then, of course, it takes a larger lag time to sell it. A painting this size takes anywhere from 18 months to 2 years to sell. And I've got all this money tied up into it. But it's a compulsion. I mean, when I take a look at the Grand Canyon, it has to be done large. For me, it's just no way. Grand Canyon this big, it can be kind of nice, but for me, it's a springboard. This is a springboard to go up to the size it should be. So people are asking me, why don't I paint bigger?
There's the Grand Canyon.
I have some plans to paint bigger. But Wilson Hurley, my dear friend Wilson Hurley, who passed away about 3 years ago now, he, after all of his examination of large-scale works, also remarked to me one time that he felt like 14 to 16 feet was like about the maximum size of painting could be viewed comfortably. The way the attenuation of the eye takes in the scene and the optimal viewing distance, sort of, he felt like about 14 to 16 feet was about the biggest size we need. So, any other questions? Yes.
I was wondering if you got into this larger size, if you use different paintbrush sizes. I'm trying to imagine, or do you ever use a palette knife?
Sometimes I use palette knife, but that's a good question. I mean, I run into artists who say, I know how you paint big. I said, how? Tell me. You just use a big brush. As a matter of fact, just the opposite. The bigger I go, the smaller the brush I have to use. And it's a dichotomy, but if I use a big brush, what happens is it turns out to be a billboard. Now, if you're driving down the freeway, 60 miles an hour to look at this, that's one thing. But if you're going to be looking at this thing for a long time, you've got to see the details in there. So I'm working down with zeros, 2s and 4s and 6 size brushes. That's why it takes so long to do. It took me 6 months to produce this painting.
When you do drawing on a large canvas, are you drawing all your details, or are you drawing just your root shapes and then painting in?
That's also a very good question. She asked, once I do the drawing on the canvas, am I putting all my details in when I do the drawing? The answer is, I feel compelled to put a lot in there, and sometimes my arm starts killing me and I start feeling pretty tired. I say, why am I putting all this detail when I just painted? So, yeah, there's a balance, but especially with my light and dark planes are occurring, and I'll show you right in here. For example, this area in here where light and dark are occurring, and I've got shadow against light, and where there is a lot of detail in the final product, and I know there's going to be a lot of detail in here, I get compelled to try to actually sketch it in and shade it even, not to stop myself. I can do it in paint. You can do it in paint. But the drawing is the structure and the backbone of the painting. If the drawing's not right, the painting's not right. I don't care how hard I try to work at color and composition. The drawing has to be right. The perspective has to be right. So I focus very intently on, first of all, the first thing I want to do is I want to know how large my viewer is. So I want to know where the horizon is. It establishes how tall you are. If I make you this big, obviously the painting of the mountain's going to be huge. Okay? So that's the first thing I want to establish is how where your eye level is. Then I want to establish the principal vanishing points. That's where on a level plane, all the lines of perspective are converging on this point. And then I want to establish how far away the optimal viewing distance from the painting we're viewing it. And that's done by a technique called the vanishing, the distance point. And that's an arbitrary point on the horizon, usually outside the picture plane. And that controls how far away the viewer is, the optimal viewing distance is from the painting. In other words, if we look at the ground plane, the further away we go, the more that ground plane becomes flat. And the closer we come to the picture, it tilts like this. So I can control how far away you are from the painting by placing this distance point at the appropriate place. Anyway, that's kind of technical. Yes?
How many galleries are able to actually show a painting that large, or do you use some other system of getting it before the public?
How many galleries are able to show this size painting? Very few. Very few are willing to because it ties up their wall space for a couple of years. I fight with them about it all the time. I paint large, and this is what I do. And it takes time to find the client, so we have to advertise it, we have to search it out, we have to work So yeah, I limit my gallery space. And but the other way I show these paintings is to put them in museum shows. Museums are usually bigger, they've got more money, they've got municipality behind them. And so they're more often likely, in fact, pleased to show paintings like this because there's so few of them.
But when you say you draw it on first, what kind of a pen? Do you use a pencil? What kind of pencil do you use?
I use an HB mechanical pencil.
So it's light.
It's light. Yeah, and I erase it sometimes. Sometimes I'll use a little solvent to take it off if I don't like it. If I place it in the wrong place, I'll move it a little bit. But HB is a good one for me. And I use mechanical pencil because I don't like to be having to be sharpened all the time. Go through a lot of pencil lids on a drawing like this.
What kind of surface do you paint on?
I paint on it's not a smooth, but it's not a rough. It's in between. And,
Linen panel?
yeah. I paint on Belgian linen by a company called Claessens. They've been making this linen since the late 1800s, I believe. And I paint on their canvas, number 15 DP, and I know that Kevin McPherson likes that, I think also, don't you? Yeah, Kevin, we like that. It's a very nice, smooth surface, but it's not too rough, but yet it's got tooth to it. And what I do is I glue my canvases down onto a hard panel so that I don't get rippling and buckling in them, because these size canvases, believe me, there's so many problems associated with them. They have to be stable. And so I glue them down archivally with an archival polyvinyl acetate glue, which is heat reversible. In case someday, I hope it never happens, but a conservationist needs to take it off for whatever reason. They can warm it up to 160 degrees, which won't affect the oil paint itself, and the whole canvas floats right off. And they can do whatever they need to do to it. So one of the criterion that conservators have when they're looking at recent restoration is it's a honeycomb aluminum panel, which is 20 thousandths aluminum on both sides with a very thin honeycomb structure in the center. It's the same construction that the airlines use for the body and wings of the airplanes. That's on the big ones. The smaller ones like these, I use another material which you can get at a local sign painting shop, but it's still a honeycomb aluminum, 20 thousandths on each side with a polyethylene honeycomb in the center. Very rigid and stiff and lightweight.
Do you enjoy doing verticals as well?
I've done verticals, but usually the human figure lends itself more to verticals in my opinion, and some I have done on the Grand Canyon vertical. They work well too, but as a general rule, the horizon is so long and it's horizontal. The landscape, to me, lends itself to a horizontal format better.
Do you sell in the East as well as the West? I was wondering how Eastern audiences will, Eastern viewers find your paintings. Do you sell mostly in the West?
I sell mostly in the West, but I do a show at the Eiteljorg Museum every year, and those are all Eastern clients. They're used to being in the trees and in the hills.
Right.
They love the West, but they're not used to that kind of environment. So, also, they're not used to the size paintings I do. They have smaller homes back there. So I put the large paintings out there anyway because that's what I do. And they wind up shipping some of them back to me. It's just inevitable. Now the last show I did last September, I put 4 paintings in. They sold 3. Now they're only shipping 1 back. But my gallery in Santa Fe was really eager to get a hold of it. They want it right, so it'll sell. There's always a market for a well-done painting. A well-done painting, there's a buyer out there for it. And my friend Wilson Hurley once told me that there's nothing worse than a large-scale, mediocre landscape. So you better make sure it's good. Don't put it out there otherwise. And I have my own inventory of paintings. Artists go through this. We have our paintings, which we call bad paintings. I've got a 50-foot trailer storage of drawings and paintings that are in my collection that I felt like I didn't want to sell it, didn't want to put out there, they weren't right, there was something not right about them, and I'm still looking at them and thinking about them. And, well, someday somebody will have to take them over, and I don't know what they'll do with them, but there was a cache of paintings discovered in New York about 15 years ago, walled in a warehouse of Picasso's work. And, well, the people that owned Picasso's paintings were in an uproar. They were angry about it. They wanted them destroyed. Did you hear about that? Ridiculous. Because they thought that was going to lower the value of their painting. I think think it would only increase it, but anyway, yes.
You said you knew Wilson Hurley. Did you paint with him, or how did you get to know him? I know Kurt
Yes.
Walters knew him,
Yes.
worked with him earlier on too. And so I wondered how you got to know him right away.
Well, in 1980, when I was a teenager, I first saw Wilson's work, and you know, I was trained as a classical musician. And music, I don't know about you folks, but music has the ability to make one weep and cry. It's pure. Well, painting, very few paintings have ever done that to me. Wilson's did. Several of Wilson's paintings made me weep, even as a teenager, a late teenager. And I decided, that's just magical. How can anybody do that kind of a thing? So in my late 20s, I met Wilson. I went up to visit with him, and I asked him if he would teach me to paint. And he told me, "I'm sorry, I can't teach you. Nobody can. You're going to have to learn it on your own." He said, "But I will help you, point you in the right direction, I'll critique your work for you, but you're going to have to get outside and you're going to have to paint on location. That's the only way to learn it. Hand-eye coordination, that's the only way to do it." So that's where the relationship began. We had a 25-year friendship after that. Yeah. Plenty of critiques, painting together. Yeah.
When you're in this step two and you're doing your drawing and you're working out your composition and value, you do that in, like, say, what size? 9 by 12? And then you have to redraw it when you go to the intermediate step. You completely take one of your 3 or 5 drawings and you completely redraw it again.
That's right. It's completely redrawn it over again. It's a very arduous, ugly process. And it gets tiring, really. Yeah. Sometimes I use a projector. That helps. But you can't project a whole entire scene like this. I recompose things. I took the repertoire from east of Yaqui Point, and this is from between. The rest of the canyon is painted from between Powell and Maricopa Point. So it's a completely different area. So I had to combine the two, put them together. So there's no way you can project an image, but I will at some point use a projector to project portions of an image and stick them together, and they have to be rearranged and redrawn and rearranged and redrawn. So I mean, it is an arduous process, and by the time the drawing's done, I'm really thankful because I want to get on to painting. That's what we all love to do. We love paint. Paint is what it's all about, right? But I found that unless I put this kind of preparation into my work, I was getting maybe sometimes 5, 6 good paintings out of 10, at best. But I found the more preparation I put into my paintings, the harder I worked at my drawing, the more I understood my perspective, the better chance I had of getting a good quality painting at the end. So that's why I do that. It is hard. It's difficult. It's a difficult process. But the results for me are better. Now, this isn't for everybody, by the way. There are a lot of artists that say, "I could never do this. It's just not for me. It's too classical, too involved." And I can understand that.
One more question. Do you do a different approach when you do a small piece like Santa Fe Skies, which is a lot looser, piece than some of the other ones have a lot more detail in them? Do you use a different process when you produce these looser stuff?
Yeah, these are done on location. These small ones are done on location, quickly within the matter of an hour, 2 hours at the most usually. And there's not a lot of time for detail. I did finish these back in the studio after they're dry, put a few final touches on them to get them ready to show and sell. Otherwise, they're kind of gray. They're not completely finished out. I put them in my own inventory and I think about it. And I use those later for color. They go into my own mind. The reason these larger paintings have so much more detail is because it demands it. The larger scale paintings demand more detail. I mean, if you don't put the detail in, as I say, it looks like a billboard. It looks flat, and there's just no interest to hold the viewer there.
Yes. Has there ever been a landscape that's truly challenged you and really worked you over a landscape that's just hard to paint?
Some paintings are easy, some paintings become very difficult, and who knows why. A lot of artists in this room that know this. Sometimes they just pop right out. They're good little children. Sometimes they really fight you. This one was not so easy. I worked on it for months. And the one I did right after it, which is the one we saw at the very beginning of this presentation, the one that just got the award. And this was really a very, I don't know what happened there. It's a great ad for Norton, isn't it? This one here, I mean, it just went step by step. It was so obedient. I really had a good fun time. Never had any problem with it. A little bit in the lower left-hand corner, I had to redesign this a couple of times in here. And that was it. Everything else just flowed right along as I worked it down. It was all, you know. And this is the intermediate painting.
I find on a small scale that oftentimes a bush here and a bush there needs to be softened and made more blurry so that you can focus on something else in
Yeah.
painting. But that's not really all that possible on a grand scale, is it?
No, because, yeah, that's a good point, because listen, when you get up into larger scale works, the eye tends to go, the eye is very sensitive. The human eye is very sensitive to abrupt changes, and it's very forgiving and unnoticing of gradual changes. And so the larger we go, the more expectation we have of detail. So if you see an area that doesn't have any detail into it, you're going to pass over it. And listen, even if a person doesn't know anything about art, technically, they know when it's right and they know when it's wrong. Yeah, it's true. We know we have it. It's built into us, just like these dimensions. We're constantly scanning our environment for what's right, and we know when it's right. So it's a real challenge for an artist to get it right. And these little things like Bob Kuster's talking about here, softening into a smaller painting, that can work pretty well, I think, in some cases, when you want your eye to pass over it and it's not so important. It can be that way in a larger painting too, but I think for the most part, it's very challenging because the eye is roaming the air, roaming the entire scene, looking for all the details. There was an experiment in the early 1900s by the Russian scientists, and they hooked up tracking devices on people's eyes, and then they showed them a picture, and they would track where their eyes would go to, and they found that the eye went right to the human figure first, and to the highest contrast, light is light against dark is dark, and that's where it hung around the most. It would scan the entire area, but it would always come back. So this area where, in this case, was a man standing in the forest, the highest concentration of movement was in and around his figure, and that was the lightest light against the darkest dark. So we actually as artists can control where our viewers are going utilizing this principle, and also utilizing the perspective. Perspective is probably a key factor in being able to create a sense of realism, getting the perspective right. Is this microphone cutting off on and off all the time?
Yeah, a little bit.
It's okay.
Have you done things other than landscape in your career?
Yes, I have. I've planned many figures. I spent 10 years, 12 years in a gallery in Santa Fe. It was a Native American gallery, Ray Tracy Gallery. They sold hundreds of Native American dancing paintings for me. Plains dancers, did a lot of Hopi dancers. Yeah, I did a lot of those. And did a number of what they call the Pawamo ceremony. I'm familiar with that. This, up on the first and second mesa, they have when they come out of the kiva, and they've been doing their ritual with this brilliant color. And, I mean, it's... Yes, I've done a lot of figurative painting, done some still lifes also, but you know, throughout the years, I've done geometric art. I studied geometric art in Europe, and in fact, I showed geometric art with a group of artists in Paris for a number of years. But throughout my career, people have told me, and I didn't want to believe this at first when I was younger, you're going to be known for your light, for the landscapes, when you put your light in the landscapes. And I said, well, I don't want to be pigeonholed. I want to do everything else. And after all the years, the last 12 years, I've concentrated exclusively on landscapes because I know first of all, that's what I love, that's what I grew up on, that's what made me weep to begin with. And second of all, that's what I'm good at. So, and I love doing it, so I never get tired of doing landscapes. Now, 2 weeks ago, I got real excited about painting fruits. Okay, I was painting lemons and apples and oranges.
So what happened?
And they're very bizarre, but they're not traditional still lifes at all. They're looking down on a lunar surface, a very textural lunar surface, with strong shadows, looking down instead of looking out like a child would look at a table.
Yeah.
These are looking down on them. But I don't have any intention of just showing those, but just for my own fun and edification. There's a saying that says if you can paint a sphere, you can paint anything. So every once in a while I get into painting fruits and little spheres and cue balls and things like that, just to keep my hand in practice and keep my eye sensitive to the way the light changes. So, and I signed them. Somebody said, well, what do you sign them for? You don't intend to sell them. Posterity.
Yeah.
They'll go in that 50-foot storage trailer, and somebody will someday pick them out. They'll find someplace in art history 100 years from now, right? I think if an artist does the same thing over and over again too much, they can get stale, they can get dry. I did that early in my career, especially when the demands of galleries. And galleries sell a certain genre of work, and they want you to keep doing the same thing over and over again. Because that's what selling was. And that's commerce, and that's part of this business is commerce. But it can burn an artist out if they're not careful. So it's important to do other things on the side, experiment, play around, and be aware of nature. It's got a lot. There's a lot to be aware of out there. So, but as I say, I'm settled in on landscape. This is what I do the best. This is what I love the best. This is what I'm known for now, and I intend to keep on doing it, along with fruits on the side. Any other questions? Well, if that's it, I want to thank you once again so much for having me.